May we be ever mindful of our oath of initiation and the bond that makes us brothers. I ask you respect the reverence for our ritual as we conduct our model initiation. During the ceremony, additional information about our great fraternity's ritual will appear on the screens. Use this as a guide for how ritual should be conducted within your own chapter.
You may be seated. As it is our duty to watch over the welfare of our fraternity, that it may continue in vigorous life, it behooves us from time to time to add to our number such men as will most honor our brotherhood. Upon these who stand before us, our choice has fallen. We are now assembled to receive the pledges of their devotion and to seal their acceptance into our brotherhood, not only to those who are received and to us who receive them, but also to all who may come within the influence of this fraternity. These pledges and this initiation are momentous. Since our words and deeds have emerged from a common heritage of acceptance and belief in a supreme being, it is an essential and basic part of our tradition to turn to God in prayer, as did our founding brothers.
Let us pray. God of our fathers and our God, who inspired the formation of the Delta Upsilon fraternity with justice its sure foundation, may we temper the rigor of our present world with a deepened appreciation of the beauty and strength of friendship. May we encourage one another and in common concern be ever faithful to the highest and best we know. Together, enable us to live bravely amid the discouragements of life, seek to acquit ourselves like men, and continue to believe in the best, even in the face of failure. May we never use our brotherhood as a measure to seek selfish ends and keep us free from cynicism. May no unworthy thoughts or deeds cloud our skies. May our actions never make rough the road for others who walk with us or who would follow. May we never fail to keep faith with those who place their trust in us. Let us renew the vows once made and now shared with these new brothers. Grant us the strength to serve and the moral courage to live more nobly and strive to achieve the maturity of independent minds. May no pettiness or pride of exclusiveness ever keep us from rendering to Delta Upsilon the vision of highest and noblest purposes as they have emerged from justice, our sure foundation. In all this we ask thy blessing, in the knowledge that the highest ideals and noblest thoughts come from thee. Amen.
Brothers in Delta Upsilon, you have unanimously elected these men to membership in our fraternity.
John Ramey, Wichita chapter; Kenny Warman, Lehigh chapter; Luke Lenny, Lehigh chapter.
Before proceeding to their initiation, however, it is fitting that we should examine once more our own hearts. In a brotherhood such as ours, a close and lasting friendship must unite all its members, creating such an intimate and permanent influence as shall mold them to a rounded type of manhood. Our past is secure. Our future depends upon our vigilance. We must jealously guard against any who may disturb the harmony of our fraternal life, against any whose presence may lower our standards or becloud our ideals. Therefore, will the members of Delta Upsilon please rise? I now challenge each of you, in the name of Delta Upsilon, does any brother know any reason why any of these candidates should not be received into the fellowship of our fraternity? Your silence makes it your duty to remove from your minds all prejudice of feelings which might hinder the discharge of any brotherly obligation. I therefore charge you so to rule your thought and conduct that in all your future relations with these men, nothing should mar the trust and brotherly affection which should ever exist between you. Please be seated. Now, as to you, who would join our brotherhood, this hour, to all of us impressive, to you gentlemen, should be especially solemn. We initiate you into no meaningless secrets, but into a brotherhood founded upon a principle which is our duty to exemplify in our lives. Dikaia Eupatheka, justice, our foundation. The relationship of a brotherhood is a sacred one. Its ties are noble, for it has been divinely established by the great exemplar as the proper bearing of man toward man. It is therefore the ideal of human relationship, an ideal that we seek to realize in our fraternal life, thereby learning from our fraternity the highest lessons of human duty and opportunity. In this brotherhood, justice is our guiding principle. And as justice is but truth in action, it is our deeds which testify our loyalty to the ideals of our fraternity and our worthiness to conserve the heritage handed down to us by past generations of Delta Upsilon. In 3 centuries now, time has endorsed the enduring value of our principles. In chapters across the United States and Canada, in loyal pursuit of our ideals, we have served our heritage and have passed along to our ever-increasing brotherhood the lessons we strive to teach. In uprightness, in nobility, in consideration of others and fair dealing with them, in constant endeavor to promote truth and equity in every relation in which we may be cast. In such ways do the lessons of our fraternity bear their richest fruit. Into such a brotherhood, we offer you the opportunity to enter. But in entering, you must pledge undying loyalty to Delta Upsilon and to its principles. It is therefore well that we should here pause to consider those ideals more fully. Brothers and guests, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight who will deliver the charge to the candidates. Brother Joshua Katz is a high school math teacher in Orange County, Florida, at University High School. In his 12 years, he has worked with 9th to 12th grade students in Algebra and Algebra 2. He has been his school's Math Teacher of the Year twice and a 5-time finalist for Teacher of the Year. Before working in secondary education, Josh spent 10 years working in higher education as well as the nonprofit world. He has his BS in math education and a master's in higher education from the University of Central Florida. For the fraternity world, Josh was a leadership consultant for our very own Delta Upsilon, the grad assistant for Greek affairs at the University of Central Florida, a chapter advisor for the DU chapter at Central Florida, and an active volunteer for the fraternity and in sorority life since 1997. His current passion is discussing education, evidenced by his 2014 TED Talk entitled The Toxic Culture of Education, which you can find on YouTube. This in turn led to his 2014 run for school board. And though the votes didn't turn out his way, he was able to gain a voice advocating for students and teachers, which continues inside and outside the classroom. In 2015, he was recognized as the Teacher of the Year for University High School and currently resides in Orlando, Florida with his wife Rebecca and his children Abigail, Madeline, and Jonah. And personally, Josh and I first met 25 years ago this very week at our first Leadership Institute. And I've been immensely proud ever since then to call him my brother. Would you please help me welcome Brother Joshua Katz, Central Florida 97.
Thank you. I have some prepared words. All right. I want to do a visualizing exercise real quick. I want you all to imagine that you have your fraternity house on campus and you live there. And if you currently do, that's easy to imagine, of course. But if you don't, just pretend for a bit that you have your fraternity house, it's on campus, and you live there. Hopefully you have that picture in your head. So imagine that you leave for your class around 9 a.m., as you usually do, but when you come back to your house, you see that there are about 30 or so random students on your front lawn, and they have signs and banners calling for your chapter to be shut down. What do you do? How do you react to that? Because this happened in reality a few months ago at Swarthmore College, and it struck a chord for me because I'm sort of a rebellious soul, and I like a good revolt from time to time. And so I was very intrigued. A group of individual students teamed up for a common purpose and organized times and locations to speak out against what they had perceived as an evil on their campus, and they took action for something they strongly believed in. They had a sit-in. They made banners reading, time's up and end the frats. And they wrote songs like 1960s protest songs. And some of them went on a hunger strike. Man, that is a quality revolt. And I dig that. But then I was torn because they were revolting against me. And they were revolting against my fraternity. And they succeeded. On the one hand, I love a good revolt, but on the other hand, against my own fraternity. And so this revolt, again, raised a far too common question over the past few years. Are fraternities even relevant anymore on college campuses? So I want to tell you a little bit about my experience and what I call my DU identity. I was fortunate in my undergraduate years. I joined a colony, so we were pretty hardcore about being non-secret and non-hazing, and we recruited with our 4 founding principles. I actually joined because I had always grown up valuing fairness, and here was this fraternity that was focused on justice. And I had realized in that year that Craig just mentioned, my first Leadership Institute here in this hotel, how fortunate I was because I was rooming with another colony member from the Shippensburg colony, and he was telling me stories about what they did in their chapter, and I learned how unique and special mine was because he told the story of how each of their new members had a roll of toilet paper, and they were forced to tear off one square at a time and go run it out of the house into the cold Pennsylvania winter and then put it in the dumpster and run back in and do the same thing with the entire roll of toilet paper until it was all empty. And this roommate of mine was really agitated. He was upset that the campus was, mad at them, and Nationals was mad at them. And he said, I didn't know cardiovascular exercise was against the law. So I realized pretty quickly how fortunate I was. And I had an amazing undergraduate experience with leadership in the chapter involvement on campus. But that was just a small part of my DU identity. It was my postgraduate experiences that make up most of who I am as a DU. And one of the most significant experiences, not only for the fraternity, but in my life, was when I worked for headquarters as a leadership consultant. And not only did I get to travel across North America and meet hundreds of brothers and alumni and recruit future staff members, but I made amazingly close friends that I'm still in contact with today. But it was through that experience that I uncovered my soul's connection to Delta Upsilon. I discovered in that time that I'm connected by, the deepest fabric of who I am to the past, the present, and the future of Delta Upsilon. I could say that I am my fraternity and my fraternity is me. And the moment where that opened up was a story when I was working on staff after my first year on the road preparing for the Leadership Institute in Jacksonville. And I had a little bit of downtime in the office, and I was looking for something to read. And so I grabbed the nearest book I can find, and it was the ritual book. So I sat down and read it for the first time cover to cover. And after reading the ritual book, I realized as much as I loved my position as a leadership consultant, I shouldn't have it. It shouldn't even exist. Everything that we had needed when I thought about my experiences from being in the chapter, from being on the road, everything that we needed was right there in that ritual book. I realized that the number one problem that was facing our chapters and our members, it wasn't alcohol or drug abuse, it wasn't hazing, it wasn't sexual assault, it was reading comprehension, because it was all right there in that ritual book. Everything we need as brothers, as chapters, is right here in this ceremony tonight. And so it was then that my deep connection to the fraternity began. It was then that I fully understood my membership. It wasn't only about my pledge class, and it wasn't only about my chapter. It wasn't even only about all of the chapters in the fraternity. I realized through that ritual book that my membership was larger than I could have ever imagined. Our membership in Delta Upsilon transcends geography and time. We're connected to the past and the present and the future. And so it was then that I could wholly and honestly and truly claim that all of Delta Upsilon's values accord entirely with my own view. And everything in my life since I have joined the fraternity is because I have joined the fraternity. And so our fraternity is still relevant. Well, for me, being a member of Delta Upsilon guides my role as a husband and as a father and as a teacher and even as a Jew. If you allow the fraternity to have just a fraction of the impact that it has had on me and those around me, my wife, my kids, my students, if you can allow just a fraction of the impact that it has had on me, I'd say the fraternity is still relevant. And man, do we need it. We're living right now in what's been called an exponential time, an exponential age. Right now, if as a person or an organization or a company, you're only changing at a linear pace, like your rate of change is just linear, you are behind the times because the times are not changing at a linear pace. They're changing exponentially. So here's an example. Right now, we're at a moment where it's possible to have two complete strangers walk near each other, and then some sort of Bluetooth technology can sync up between those two strangers without them even knowing. And then in that sync, all sorts of data and pictures and histories can be exchanged and sorted and run through some sort of compatibility algorithm. And then a score is produced that will indicate whether or not those two strangers should meet right there at that moment. And the whole thing can happen instantaneously. Now, imagine fraternity life through that lens of possibilities, exponential change. Brothers, we're still having the same discussions about men's behavior that we had when I was in college. Alcohol and drug abuse, sexual assault, hazing, reading comprehension, So is our behavior as a fraternity on that exponential curve of change? That's what we have to think about. Now, there's one thing we are dealing with that has been a product of that exponential change, and I want to thank the Lafayette chapter for your recognition tonight, because I want us to look at mental health, at suicide rates, at addictive behaviors, destructive behaviors for men. Young men are facing issues from this exponential change. And as a fraternity, we have a real opportunity to be relevant in terms of mental health and interpersonal connections, actual connections, because that's where social networking misses the mark. About 3 years ago, I rationalized how, in the long run, my 3 children would be okay with my death. And it wasn't so much that I was going to commit suicide. It's just that, man, I just really wanted to die. And so, yeah, I dealt with depression. And I still deal with it today. And I'm willing to bet I'm not the only one in this room who feels that way. So how can the fraternity be relevant? If your chapter is doing it right, you have a few people that you can tell the truth to. And that's what the fraternity can offer in these exponential times. At my lowest point a few years ago, I was able to open up to 2 of my fraternity brothers. And getting help isn't about asking for help, which what a lot of people will tell you. Let's say, just I'm here, ask me for help. It's not like that at all. It's about being open enough and vulnerable enough to answer honestly the toughest question you hear. Hey, Josh, how you doing? That question gets asked a gazillion times a day, but it is a loaded question when you're in that mental state. Hey, Josh, how you doing? Most of the time, you don't tell the whole truth or any of it when you respond to that question. So the fraternity, if done right, can give you people to which you can answer that question honestly. And when I was at my lowest point, I did tell my wife how I was feeling, but that didn't help because all we did was just cry a lot. The help came when I was able to be vulnerable enough to open up to 2 of my fraternity brothers. So in this exponential world where relationships are shifting in a way that's leaving a serious mental health mark on young men, the fraternity can be relevant in providing, as our ritual just said, the proper bearing of man toward man. As a fraternity, we must find a way to link our history and our values and our 4 founding principles, our non-secrecy, and most importantly, our commitment to justice to this exponential curve of change in the world. We have to get off the linear path of change and aggressively promote friendship and aggressively diffuse liberal culture and develop character and advance justice in this current technological and social environment without having to deal with all of the nonsense that we still allow in our chapters. We don't have time for tolerating cultures in our chapters of sexual assault or hazing or drug and alcohol abuse. Brothers, we have real work to do right now. The people of our world are yearning like never before for the promotion of friendship. Our communities back home have a critical void that can only be filled by the diffusion of liberal culture. Our young men, husbands, fathers, and everyone in contact with us has a need for role models and leadership that can only be built by the development of character. And all people on earth, from a hungry worker with 3 jobs who has to share a hotel room with 4 other people just to pay rent to live, to the multinational corporations they work for, or to the small businesses that they plan to develop, from the services of public education to the governments that administer it, everywhere in our world, in our life, like I've never seen before in my lifetime, right now, our planet is screaming for the advancement of justice. And I want to close by going back to the Swarthmore situation and all the other fraternity news this past year, because this popular question of if fraternities are still relevant, I want to revisit that revolt and my struggle processing it, because here's where I landed. Why not? Why not a revolt against my fraternity? Why not a revolt against my DU identity? Why not a revolt against our slow pace of change in exponential times? I can't speak for all fraternities about how to react to the Swarthmore revolt, but I can speak for mine. I think Delta Upsilon welcomes this revolt. I think what happened at Swarthmore was an entirely DU thing to happen. I mean, a group of individual students teamed up for a common purpose and organized a way to speak out against what they perceived as an evil on their campus, and they took action. Does that sound familiar? Like, November 4th, 1834, familiar? I think Delta Upsilon is very relevant because this is exactly what non-secrecy calls for. However you reacted to visualizing that revolt happening to you at your chapter and on your campus, non-secret means looking at the student revolt and saying, bring it on. You're mad at us? Awesome. Let's talk about it. We've got nothing to hide. You think we've done wrong? Fine. What is it that we've done wrong, and how do we make it better? Because that's what our ritual instructs us to do. You think you know what fraternities should be like or if they should even exist? Great. Let me read you our ritual and tell me what you think. Let's discuss our 4 founding principles and talk about how to make that a reality on our campus and in our community. Because we are relevant, and Delta Upsilon can prove it. Brothers, this is coming. This conversation, this revolt is coming. What happened at Swarthmore is going to happen on your campus. What will you do when that time comes? Being non-secret, Delta Upsilon says, bring it on. But will you prepare? Will you lead that discussion in your chapter and on your campus? Because when you think about the issues that you are currently discussing in your chapter meetings or in your one-on-one conversations with your brothers, are you on that exponential curve of change? Or will you be left behind? Because no matter where you are or where your chapter is, Delta Upsilon is uniquely equipped to head up this revolt. And you can see that's exactly what we've been doing as an organization. That's what non-secret means. This is what our DU identity means. As we said in Rite I, the battles of justice are infinite, and her champions are ever needed to serve her cause, both in the college and in the world beyond. To forward the ends of enlightened equity demands knowledge and sympathy, the broad mind and the large heart. This means that we are relevant. This means that your membership is relevant. And this means that we all have a massive job to do. And I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
I ask that the candidates please rise. Brother Master, I present to you these candidates president to be admitted to the fellowship in the Delta Upsilon fraternity. They have made the preliminary declarations and, having learned the nature of the pledges, are prepared to take them.
The pledges I now propose to you, you must take upon your word of honor to hold them sacred and inviolable forever. The candidates will individually pronounce "I" and their full name, and then in unison repeat after me. I,
John Rainey. I, Kenny Warren. I, Luke Lenny.
of my own free will and accord,
Of my own free will and accord.
in the presence of God and of these witnesses,
In the presence of God and His witnesses.
do hereby solemnly declare
Do hereby solemnly declare
that the principles of this fraternity,
that the principles of this fraternity,
as they have been explained to me,
as they have been explained to me,
accord entirely with my own views.
accord entirely with my own views.
And I solemnly promise
And I solemnly promise
that as a member of this fraternity,
that as a member of this fraternity,
I will faithfully adhere to those principles,
I will faithfully adhere to those principles,
endeavoring in every way to perfect myself,
endeavoring in every way to perfect myself,
morally, intellectually, and socially,
morally, intellectually, and socially,
and endeavoring also to act towards others
and endeavoring also to act towards others
according to that high standard of conduct
according to that high standard of conduct
required by the fraternity.
required by the fraternity.
I solemnly promise that I will be loyal
I solemnly promise that I will be loyal
to the Delta Upsilon fraternity
to the Delta Upsilon fraternity
and to my chapter,
and to my chapter,
abiding by their rules,
abiding by the rules,
discharging my obligations to them faithfully,
discharging my obligations to them faithfully,
and using all honorable means to promote their interests. I solemnly promise that I will share with my brothers the duties of my chapter, that I will uphold and encourage them in all that is honorable and right, that I will ever extend to each brother the right hand of sympathy, and that at all times and in all circumstances I will endeavor to cultivate those sentiments which should ever exist between brothers. All this I solemnly promise upon my honor, without any equivocation, mental reservation, or secret evasion of mind whatsoever. Brothers, we are all witnesses to these pledges. Do you, before God and in the presence of these witnesses, acknowledge the signature which you have subscribed herein to the pledges just now repeated? If so, you will answer to your name, I do.
John Ramey, Wichita chapter. I do. Kenny Warman, Lehigh chapter. Luke Lenny, Lehigh chapter.
Receive and wear this badge in token of your membership in the Delta Upsilon fraternity. I extend to you the right hand of fellowship. Receive and wear this badge in token of your membership in the Delta Upsilon fraternity. I extend to you the right hand of fellowship. Receive and wear this badge in token of your membership in the Delta Upsilon fraternity. I extend to you the right hand of fellowship. Initiates of Delta Upsilon, you have this day received a distinction which is granted to few men, decoration with the insignia of our fraternity. It marks the confidence which we repose in you. May the ties which it symbolizes strengthen perpetually, and may its possession instill in you the spirit of undying loyalty to Delta Upsilon. By virtue of the authority vested in me, I now declare you members of the Delta Upsilon fraternity. I ask that all brothers please stand. For as much as these men have now become your brother, it is your part and duty to aid him in their struggle towards a larger life, to recall to their minds what solemn pledges they have just now repeated before this company, to instruct, reprove, and admonish them with all kindness, according to the principles of our fraternity and the truth that is in you, and to share with them the benefits and duties of life together. You may be seated. And as for you who have been newly received into our fraternal circle, it is your part and duty and mine to remember that you are now one with us in principle and in purpose. You are to share with us the privileges and divide with us the responsibilities of faithful service in Delta Upsilon. May your zeal in its cause never flag. May your sympathy with its interests ever grow deeper. May our mutual regard increase as time shall heighten our appreciation of the noble sentiments which have made us one. May culture, justice, and morality be the motives of your life, as they have been the motives of our union. May the bonds forged today unite us forever in sturdy resolve to attain that goal of true manhood, aspiration toward which is the sign and seal of our fraternity. This concludes the rite of initiation. It's with great pride I now present our newest brothers in Delta Upsilon.